Hey, welcome to the Backyard Professor Live, Sunday evening, 1 hour early at 5 p.m. People like my dear friend Radio Free Mormon are demanding to know why we're starting earlier. And that is because my other dear friend on the other side of my screen over there, Steve, right there you are. Take a look. Yeah, good enough. He is on the East Coast, and so I am accommodating him with great joy and verve and excitement. Tonight, we are going to talk about the Book of Mormon being the only true book on the face of the whole earth. So let's get this show on the road. We're going to have a fun conversation on what makes the Book of Mormon tick, other than just tapping it.
That opening always gets me going, man.
Welcome back. I'm just straightening up my pile of J.R.R. Tolkien books. I have watched all 3 Lord of the Rings this weekend, on Labor Day weekend.
Is that an annual tradition you do?
No, but I'm going to start one.
Okay. Well, it's not an annual tradition until you do it the second year in a row. So.
Oh, that's right. Well, I will have to do that again tomorrow just to make sure to catch up for next year. So
okay,
I'm always behind. So, Steve, it is so good to see you again, my friend. You're looking great. How's it going?
Going really good. Yeah, it's been a crazy summer, man. Sunstone was awesome. And then in July and in June, I went to Rochester, New York for the Mormon History Association. And then in May, end of May, I was in Independence, Missouri to speak at a Book of Mormon rally. And along with fellow Protestant David Boyce of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks and others. And then in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be going to John Whitmer Historical Association, where I have been asked to give a presentation. So it's all very exciting. It's all good stuff. So doing a lot of traveling, and this is being paid for by the channel through ad revenue, as well as all the people who are financially supporting the channel. A shout out to all of you for making this possible.
That is very cool. That's very nice. Brother, you get around. I'm getting ready to do a Thrive discussion on September 12th, I do believe, down in Utah. But I haven't traveled this much this summer because of my dear mother breaking her hip. And we're trying to take care of her and get her situated. And oh my goodness, what a concept. So,
well, speaking of getting old, isn't this Thrive event for the older ones? Isn't this the
Excuse me, what are you hinting at there, Pynakker?
I'm just saying.
Yes, it is for us. It is for us old curmudgeons, and we are going to have a party hardy. I guarantee it. So let's say hi to the folks real quick. Looks like Radio Free Mormon is here. Tim Rathbone, Heather Reddick, good to see you again. Look at this. Mo Sia has been promoted. He is a member for 22 months. He asks, does this mean I get a bronze sash? Yes, absolutely. I'll make you one if I have to. And then looks like we have Heather's Mark Crispin. Yeah, baby. That's for all of you. Alan Zabriskie, good to see you. Mo C, I've said that. Peter Higgs from Down Under, good to see you. What a great way to start his day, having us two on. Doug Vincent, as always, one of the Rock of Gibraltars of my channel.
Yep.
I love that guy. He is something
Doug,
else.
you haven't commented on one of my videos for a while. Where you at? Where you been?
Yeah, no kidding. Don Smith, good to see you. And looks like we've got quite a few people here that Andrea Timmers, nice to see you. Radio Free Mormon. That's right. Let's put this comment up here from our beloved Radio Free Mormon. Who did Pynakker steal all those books from? Yeah,
That's a good question.
we want to know. Look, his bookshelf is rivaling mine. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just want to know where he learned how to spell my name, my last name. But
yeah, so basically, I got.
He obviously didn't, did he? Oh,
so I got the second bookshelf right behind me. I just got that. And I just want to tell people that this here, that small bookshelf in the corner, is representative of what my collection was when I started the channel. This is what it's become. Many of these have been books sent to me by authors. See that Joseph Smith papers up there? That was overnighted to me by the church so that I could have Robin Jensen on. And many of these were given to me, including these wonderful paintings by CCA Christensen, a beautiful box set. People send me books all the time. And so virtually none of these that I pay for. So in one sense, yeah, I did kind of steal them. So
yeah, nice going. That's because you're going to steal the championship, buddy. Good. Yeah, when I get my book done, I'll send you my book too. My book's not going to be on Mormonism, though. It's going to be on reality. Oh, wait.
I don't know. Are you the person that we would want to have to talk with about a book about reality?
Well, fine. Yeah, that's kind of pushing the envelope, isn't it? I don't know how much I know about reality other than atoms are big and galaxies are small in some world somewhere. So anyway, listen, I really enjoyed your interview that you just recently had on the Book of Mormon. And now this is a subject that I haven't done a whole lot of on my channel. And I know it kind of circulates, doesn't it? There for a while, all of us YouTubers are talking about the Book of Abraham and the papyri, and then we go off on Joseph Smith's history stuff, and then we'll do some social issues every time the church opens its mouth, it sticks its foot in there, and we talk about that for a while. And now it seems like it's kind of coming back around to the Book of Mormon, but your story makes this particularly more interesting for all the rest of us because you've never been Mormon, and you're studying Mormonism and the Book of Mormon harder than the majority of us are. You are putting us to complete shame, Steve Pynakker. What do you have to say about it? No, tell us, in your interview, you were talking about what I'd like to kind of chat with you about is, now, I come from the tradition that the Book of Mormon was real history, and I was an apologist for that for quite a while. And I have never actually considered any other option, really, because, of course, the famous label, oh, well, that's an anti-Mormon stance, and so you leave that alone. And through the years, I've kind of gained a little bit better maturity on how to approach literature, barely. And I am discovering that there is actually a value to pique my interest in taking another look at the Book of Mormon again and again and again without worrying about whether it really happened, but in more of an attempt to just understand what it is. What does it say? And so you're an evangelical Christian. You're not a Mormon, and yet you're studying this and you find great interest in the Book of Mormon. So let's talk about that. I'm gonna give you the table for the next 3.5 days here. Marathon.
You promise we're gonna keep this under 90 minutes because it's late here in the East Coast.
It is not. You're a young squirt. You can last till midnight, pal.
Not as young as you think I am. This is the thing. I think it was last Memorial Day weekend. It was Monday. It was Memorial Day. And I turn on my TV and freaking John DeLynn is doing a live thing on Memorial Day evening. I'm like, that guy works so hard. So when you called me and asked me if I would come on your program the day before Labor Day, on Labor Day weekend, I was going to say, I'm going to show everybody I can work just as hard as John DeLynn. So here I'm on a holiday weekend, because obviously your other guests, they wimped out because they wanted to go on a vacation. Plus, the nice thing for you is, nobody's going to be watching, so you don't have to be embarrassed by, you could say, well, Steve, you did come on my program. Nobody watch because
I don't embarrass anyway, so I don't give a flying flip.
But that was like really instructive to me about the dedication of somebody like John DeLynn.
and other podcasters who really work their tails off all the time. And in many ways, a lot of this has come very easy to me. And for some people, they have to work a lot harder than I do, because not everybody, everybody's different, right? And for me, it's come easy. But then I look at somebody like John DeLynn, who in 2005 hears a voice tell him, you need to start a podcast. And who even heard of a podcast in 2005, right? And that set him on a trajectory. And so the work that he does is just amazing. Now, I know, I'm the Switzerland of Mormonism. I'm friends with everybody. And so for those of you who are TBMs, you probably don't like me saying nice things about John, but I do, because he's my friend, and I'm very, very, very loyal to my homies. As you all know, I have been stepping up and defending some people recently. But John, it kind of is the gold standard of Mormon podcasters.
Sure.
His gravitational pull is what we all are rotating around, whether you're a faithful Mormon podcaster or ex-Mormon or evangelical. Everybody rotates around John DeLynn. And so I just want to give him props.
But none of us tell him that, because we don't want him to swell his fat head, right?
That's right.
Keep this a secret.
We won't tell him. And I'll make sure every time I see him, I always try to knock him down a few pegs too. So.
Nobody tell DeLynn that we talked about him on the BYP channel. So
so yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, and then I was like, well, hey, we can talk about anything. You can do a stream of consciousness thing or whatever you want to do. And then I said, well, did you see my interview with the Paul brothers, in which I came on? It's called The Stick of Joseph. And these guys are going to be superstars. These guys are already they're rising stars. And they came on my program when nobody really knew who they were. And of course, now this is the third YouTuber channel that I've had come on that have gotten bigger than me. The first was Jeff McCullough of Hello Saints, and then David Boyce of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. Now he's bigger than me. And Jeff McCullough had 700 subscribers when I had him on my program. Now he's got 55,000,
Don't worry. None of the rest of us will pass you, Steve. It's all good.
And then what was it? The third one is the Stick of Joseph guys, who got started earlier this year, and now they're bigger than me, which is fine. Honestly, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I don't not bothered by that at all. I actually think it's kind of cool myself, to do that. I always feel like I'd rather have somebody when they were small, because they'll always be grateful to me no matter how big they get. I'll always have a special spot in their heart. And so that's the strategy I have, rather than be jealous. The jealousy does no good. It only brings harm to yourself.
Very, very self-serving of you. Very good.
It is extraordinarily self-serving. I know. So you had mentioned, so you watched the interview with the Paul brothers, and I got tremendous feedback. As a matter of fact, RFM was somebody, my phone was ringing off the hook. He really enjoyed it. And so I was like, and I was just basically just going up there like, hey dudes, let's just go on and let's tape something. And then we had lunch, and then I taped an interview for my program. And, it just goes to show that I can be an evangelical Christian who does not regard the Book of Mormon as scripture. I tell Mormons, though, I said the Book of Mormon does not function as scripture to me, but it doesn't bother me that it functions as scripture to you. And one of the main reasons I love the Book of Mormon so much is that how thoroughly Christian of a document it is. I go so far as to say that the Book of Mormon is one of the most Christian books ever produced on American soil. And so I look at the Book of Mormon not as some kind of enemy to Protestant Christianity, but it actually, to me, it plays this really cool role. We have this book came out of a time where you had the Second Great Awakening going on, right? And almost all the preachers back then were speaking extemporaneously. Now you have to understand that up until this point, all the pastor's sermons would be published in the papers. The last week's sermon would be published in the papers for all the main churches. And so we have documents of these sermons that are given in the newspapers because they're all written. So they just hand them it over, and then the newspaper publishes them. Well, you have this phenomenon thing happen where you have the Second Great Awakening happening, and many of these pastors, some of them aren't, super literate, or they didn't go to the higher institutions of higher learning. Many of them were just common folk, regular folk, right? Mm-hmm. And they would often not prepare their sermons, but they would kind of feel the Holy Spirit and do these extemporaneous sermons, outdoor sermons.
Yeah.
And John Hamer,
and then back then too, sorry to interrupt you, but I get yelled at a lot for interrupting my speakers, but those extemporaneous sermons were not just 10-minute TikTok videos.
No, they weren't.
They were not 3-minute quick shorts that we've been brainwashed into thinking is intellectually intelligent in our pastor today. Those were 6 and 7 hour long sermons without microphones.
Right.
Yeah, those were the real deals. So,
Yes. And I think what makes the Book of Mormon this remarkable document is that you almost could argue, again, I'm just going to, using a naturalistic argument, there's no God, there's no angels. How does one take into account the Book of Mormon, right?
Okay, so we're going to eliminate the supernatural.
Right.
How do we account for this book? That's
right.
Okay. All right.
And I think that when you look at the time period this is birthed out of, it's people giving extemporaneous speeches, okay? And we don't have any documentation of them. But one of the most beautiful things about the Book of Mormon is it actually preserves, if you will, types of what you could say sermons from the book of from this period of time. Most notably, King Benjamin's outdoor revival service, and so many of the themes and terminologies and phraseologies that one would have used in the Second Great Awakening sermons, we get to read in the Book of Mormon. So it actually serves as a really important
Wait, you're telling me King Benjamin's speech reflects the cultural environment of Joseph Smith?
Yes.
Okay, let me put on my apologetic hat for
Please do, because I'll put it on too.
Because okay. Yours is much better than mine. Mine's just a shabby head of hair, but I'm getting my hair cut tomorrow. But okay, so as an apologist, I was raised to believe, thanks to the labors of, and I'll bet my audience can guess, Hugh Nibley, that King Benjamin's speech has all of the contexts of an ancient speech. He did that in his an approach to the Book of Mormon. I won't bother reading it. I actually might do a video on that just to show the apologetic stance. And from him, Jack Welch from Farms followed up, sharing even further. And to be fair, it is parallels to ancient rhetorical devices, ancient subjects, etc. But you're saying the new. So this was discounted as one of the ways of demonstrating the authenticity of the Book of Mormon as history. And now you're saying, I've never seen a study on this in detail like Nibley's. Of course, that I'm probably giving away my great fund of ignorance with the environmental factors. Dan Vogel's probably done a lot of this. But the contemporary newspapers now are discussing pretty much the same ideas and themes that's in King Benjamin address.
That would have, so you would have similar, and you would have had, there's altar calls to repentance, all these kind of things, so this is part of the lingo. So, but what I'm trying to say is that you actually have what you could argue is a 19th century Second Great Awakening revival sermon in the Book of Mormon. So it's actually is historical in that sense, right? But again, and we can take this the Jonathan Neville way too, and just show that, because I do think like the stronger argument is that Joseph Smith was an active participant in the translation of the book. Like, let's say he is engaging some kind of ancient text. Okay, whether that ancient text is this 1676 King James Version, or which is based on an ancient text, right? Or maybe dealing with another text. I mean, honestly, I don't really. That's a secondary thing to me, because I do believe that Joseph, as translator, like even Brigham Young said, that if the Book of Mormon came out now, it would be a completely different book than it is today. So he even recognized the environmental influences of the time would have been on the text. So this is not, like, we showed you. This is more like, no, this is really interesting that there's something invaluable as evangelicals to actually be able to engage the Book of Mormon, and it's realized that it's actually a very evangelical book, and it's actually an important book that kind of actually documents the history of our movement in a beautiful way. So I like that in approaching the Book of Mormon in that context. Thus, it also makes the Book of Mormon more approachable for evangelicals to engage the text and recognize that it's not, one, satanic in origin. I don't believe that for a minute. Okay, I don't think Satan had anything to do with it.
Well, I mean, if there's no God, then there's no
supernatural, right? Then there's no Satan. Yeah, exactly. But even if there is one, I don't think it has anything to do with that, because because the Book of Mormon confesses that Jesus Christ is Lord. And the devil is not going to produce a book that's going to have that in there, because that would be antithetical to everything that the devil stood for. So all these QAnon whack job evangelicals who think like the devil was behind this whole thing, and this is one of my favorite panels. So I got Chick Tracks, Chick Tracks. Okay.
The Enchanter.
Yeah. So and look, the Enchanter. Look at Emma. Look at that look on her face. And
oh, take me to your leader.
So I want to show this one panel because I actually reviewed this along with Mark Elwood's book, graphic novel. But if you look at this panel here, you have Satan in hell talking to one of his minions. Now look, I mean, this is pretty graphic, but I'm going to read
like something out of Tolkien.
I know, but I but I want to read this what they're talking about here. Right. So it starts at the prefaces. In the 1800s, the Word of God became alive and revivals were sweeping across America. The Protestant and Baptist churches were on fire for God. So now we switch to hell. And here's Satan. I hate these revivals. They must be killed. To do this, I need a man born into the occult to be my prophet. Someone who can write books that will rival the Bible. This is the devil. One of his minions goes to him and says, "We have such a man, master. His name is Joseph Smith. Bless and support him, and he will create a powerful religion." And then the devil goes, "Of course I will, you idiot." And that's exactly what happened. So in this guy's mind, this is exactly what happened, that there was a conversation in hell and that the devil decided that he was going to, use the Joseph Smith.
And so he outsmarted God by using Joseph Smith better than God did. Yeah, right. That's good.
So this is just a weird story. And these Chick Tracks were super popular.
You can say that again.
90s. You had the satanic panic stuff going on. And people wonder why so many evangelicals are into this QAnon stuff. It's because of garbage like that, right? Though that's bearing false witness as far as I'm concerned in one sense. I think that it's important to engage Mormons in fact-based, in a truthful, in a Christian way, okay? And so to me, the Book of Mormon is just a fascinating document. I think it's a Christian document. I think it's also a very Pentecostal document. It actually anticipates the 1906 Azusa Street revival with fully developed Pentecostal doctrine that we thought was original to the 1906 revivals. Okay, there's actually fully developed Pentecostal doctrine in a book published in 1830 that wasn't understood as being fully developed Pentecostal doctrine until 1906 with the Azusa Street, with the Assemblies of God and the Four Square Churches and Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee. They developed their theology. And then my friend, Dr. Christopher Thomas of a Pentecostal reads the Book of Mormon, because he's a Pentecostal, realizes like, what? How is this in here? This is almost an anachronism, if you will. that this weird thing is that because these fully formed doctrines didn't exist at this time, but they find their way into the Book of Mormon. So it's a challenge to Pentecostalism. It's a challenge to evangelicalism. It's a challenge to people who take the Bible literally.
And it's a challenge to the Mormon apologists. How the hell did environmental information get into the Book of Mormon in Joseph Smith's day when it's supposed to be an ancient book? So I don't know if the Mormons are going to like, the apologists are going to like your stance here, young man.
This is the thing. If we take this position that Jonathan Neville is advocating, which is saying that because fingerprints of Joseph Smith are going to be all over the Book of Mormon. More importantly, the fingerprints of Jonathan Edwards are. More importantly, all these other external factors are going to make their way into the Book of Mormon, because even the term, look, the natural man is an enemy of God, is not in the Bible. It's from Jonathan Edwards. That whole term, the natural man is an enemy of God. And I imagine if Joseph Smith is engaging some kind of text, or whether it's an ancient one or not so ancient, that his best terminology to do this translation would to use that terminology, because that would fit best within the context of when King Benjamin's saying these kind of things. So for me, that's an interesting way to look at it. I just find that to be a much more interesting way than just trying to absolutely prove it to be true or absolutely to try to dismantle it. I'm much more interested in, not is the Book of Mormon fact or fiction. I'd rather say, is the Book of Mormon fact and or fiction? A little bit of both.
Fair point. Very interesting. Yeah. I think I'm now at this point in my journey through this whole situation, I'm probably more comfortable with that than I have been ever as an apologist with this theme that you're kind of bringing in now. Is it such a hard line drawn dichotomy between well, you could say true or false, because from from the typical TBM point of view, simply because of the way we were taught. And I confess, I haven't been to church for a long time, so I don't know. They might have changed this, but is it true or false? Is it history or fiction? Almost the same thing. Those are almost synonym approaches in a way. That's why I made this that title, because I knew you have a more, what would you call it, a nuanced view. There could be fiction in there, but it's not going to damage the message of the Book of Mormon. Like Bill Hamblin used to always say, he insisted absolutely die-hard, hardcore, total history. Everything in it happened as it is described. There can't be any fiction in it. And yet people would ask him, well, I mean, there's fiction in Jesus's teachings with the parables.
Right.
That didn't affect the truthfulness of the message.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. So you have to understand that I was an atheist for like 12 years. So I deconstructed the Bible. And I could say that I'm probably...
Oh, I'd love to do that with you here too.
Yeah, we could do one on the Bible.
Let's have a conversation. We ought to do a marathon conversation on that. Wouldn't that be a hoot?
Yeah, it would be interesting. Well, because see, to me, I look at it this way. Well, first of all, there was this book came out in the 1990s called The Ironic Christian Companion. And somebody had brought up to the author, well, what about the Book of Mormon? What are we to do about the Book of Mormon? And the author goes and says, well, look at it this way.
Throw it out.
No, well, no, this is what they said. Well, 10,000 years from now, this period of time would be considered early church history. And so it would, so the Bible and the Book of Mormon would be much closer to each other from somebody from 10,000 years ago. And at that point, the Book of Mormon would certainly be considered an ancient document as well, right? So it's fascinating to think from the perspective of the, from a time frame that 10,000 years from now, the first 2,000 years of the church are going to be considered early church history. And so then it doesn't, I kind of look at it from that perspective. I also look at it this way, dude. We already have this in our own Bible with the coming forth of the Deuteronomy, the book of the law, and all this kind of stuff, where, hey, look, we found this document and it addresses all of our common issues that we're having in our modern society. That's exactly what the Book of Mormon does in the 1820s. So to me, if we even have
what an interesting parallel.
Yes.
I've never thought of it that way. That was cool. Say that again. Go through that one more time. That was interesting. How did you just say that?
Well, I just look at it this way, is that we already have a Book of Mormon found in the Bible, because we have a book that's found that, interestingly enough, the very criticism that's used by the original evangelicals against the Book of Mormon is how convenient we have this new scripture that comes out that seems to address all the issues of our time. It seems to be addressing our audience. And yet we also have the book of Deuteronomy do the exact same thing in the context of the Bible. And so for me, that's just like, that's why the Book of Mormon is not a foreign concept to me, because I'm not somebody who believes that the canon should be closed. Or that was part of the Counter-Reformation. That's an anti-Protestant thing. I don't think Protestants should believe in the closed canon. I think that's a Catholic doctrine. And I think the Restorationists are right on that, because I don't think we should limit God into how Scripture should come forth. Now, I'm not here advocating that the Book of Mormon is Scripture, but I'm also saying that I'm not going to, I don't feel like...
Well, but it fulfills that criteria, though.
But so, it does. That's the thing. I like to do
that's what a Mormon apologist is going to tell you. They're going to say, Pynakker, you're being inconsistent here.
That's fine. I don't care. I like being in the gray zone. I don't want to be living in a black and white world. And I don't want to go and follow the gatekeepers. I'm just going to go and just do my own thing. And I'm going to go and just weave around and do whatever I want. So I'm much more interested in those kind of conversations, because the Book of Mormon and the Bible are having a conversation with each other. And I find it to be an interesting dialogue. The Book of Mormon is certainly having a conversation with the Bible. The argument is the Bible also having a conversation with the Book of Mormon, right? You can tease things out of it. I just think that's much more interesting. But we actually have something that purports to be Scripture that's having a conversation with my Scripture. And there's very little in the Book of Mormon that would undermine the Bible or that contradicts it. And that the teachings in the Bible are very biblically based and are very Protestant. So there's nothing in the Book of Mormon that I have any really objections to. So the content is not a problem for me at all.
May I interject a comment? This is fascinating to me. This is absolutely fascinating to me, because as an apologist, now we've all noted, I mean, RFM in Mormonism Live and myself and a lot of other podcasters have noted that the the church is really seriously changing. And yet what you just said shows me that Christianity, and I'm going to say Protestant Christianity, I'm not trying to throw labels, I'm just saying Christianity has also appeared to change, because that is not what I heard as an apologist from the Christian world. So this is quite an interesting development that you're, if I put it that you're representing, I don't want to misrepresent what you're doing or who you
Nor
are.
am I representing anybody but myself.
I agree. But your whole premise, your philosophical substratum of all of this is that there is not necessarily a negative issue involved here when we put the two books of Scripture together, and yet that is not how Christianity has approached Mormonism. So perhaps, let me just throw a thought out, and I'll get your thought on this. Do you think that, I mean, the question answers itself. Obviously, the internet has something to do with this, wouldn't you suppose? More information is getting out across the borders between different Christian groups, so that perhaps we're discovering that, hey, after all, there's not all that much difference between all of this than we have supposed.
Well, let's look at it this way.
Statement?
Let's look at it this way. What I find so fascinating is that, in one sense, mainline Protestant Christianity has embraced the Book of Mormon, because the Community of Christ for decades had an observer status with the National Council of Churches. And one of the big things that was kind of preventing them from being a member of the National Council of Churches, which is the mainline Protestant, umbrella ecumenical organization, was the Book of Mormon. They still acknowledge the Book of Mormon as being their scripture. It still is scripture in their church. It's still recognized. And guess what? Over the course of the last decade and a half, the Community of Christ is now in membership with the National Council of Churches, is in communion with these churches, exchange pulpits with these churches. So in one sense, the Book of Mormon has almost, in one sense, been baptized into mainline Protestantism, interestingly enough. And not only that,
I love that image. Boy, the Mormon apologists are going to kick your butt now, pal. They're not going to like that.
So now we have Protestant churches that are in communion with the Community of Christ, and the Book of Mormon functions as scripture.
So the Big Church is not leading the way. The apostate Joseph Smith III.
Isn't it interesting?
But it's still Mormonism, isn't it? That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So to me, it's like, okay, this is interesting. So now it is part of Protestant Christianity in one sense, because now what's going to happen is not, and within the next few years, so you have these agreements with the United Methodist Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, which is the liberal church. Don't confuse evangelical for conservative in this case. You have the Episcopal Church. You have the United Church of Christ, which has its roots, some of its roots in Restoration as well. And then you're going to have, it's only a matter of time before Community of Christ is in full communion with these churches, if they aren't already. So Book of Mormon is really part of Christianity in one sense already.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. You're okay. Now, of course, you're taking a much smaller branch of Mormonism.
Still the Book of Mormon.
You're taking a specific particular and generalizing, which might be a logical fallacy. I'm not quite sure of that just yet. I'm just throwing an idea out at you, but I take your meaning. I take your point. Things are changing, and perhaps in order to get the better dialogue, instead of attempting to show everybody else is wrong, etc., this can lead more to and you and I have talked about this before, both on your channel and mine here. The dialogue has to become more mature and more friendly, friend basis, instead of worrying about convert or deconvert.
Right.
What about understanding?
Yeah, understanding is important. I also think that it's important that we have a mature relationship with our scriptures, whether you're Protestant or Catholic or you're Restorationist, because there are anachronisms in the Bible.
Sure.
There are historical problems in the Bible. There is non-history in the Bible. Okay.
Right.
So to me, the Book of Mormon is in many ways as real to me as the Bible is.
So so I just kind of look at it from this direction, because again, like I said, I deconstructed my scriptures. So I do this fearlessly. I'm not afraid to take the Book of Mormon and take it seriously as a text, and also recognize that my Bible has some issues, still have a regard for the Bible, that I use as a guide and something that's important in my life. And then I can also look at the Book of Mormon and also get stuff out of that too, right? And then I also think that if Christians are to engage, like evangelicals want to actually engage the restoration, in particular the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they literally have the Book of Mormon as their best friend, because the Book of Mormon can serve as a second witness with the Bible to be used to determine later doctrinal changes in the church. So, like for instance, I would argue that I don't believe in. Let's think of I don't believe that God has a body, because both the Book of Mormon and the Bible tell us that God is a spirit.
Oh, but Joseph Smith overcame that with a revelation.
Right, but this is the thing. He may have a revelation, but we're given a book that says it's the fullness of the gospel. So we have two witnesses. And so even after anything Joseph Smith says afterwards, still has to be weighed in by those two witnesses. So that's why I think that then evangelicals could say, well, the reason why I don't believe in exaltation or whatever is because the Book of Mormon doesn't teach it. And I think that's a legitimate approach to take, especially when all the other restorationist groups that are not Utah-based are using that approach when they're dealing with their doctrinal disputes with the Latter-day Saint Church. So to me, I think evangelicals should do the exact same thing, because then you're engaging and using LDS scripture and actually integrating it into your conversations that you can have with people. And like, I quote the Book of Mormon. I tell stories from the Book of Mormon as to illustrate certain things that I'm doing. It's very useful to do that, because like I said, the Book of Mormon is scripture. It functions as
just not literal.
And just like the Quran is scripture, just like, you understand what I'm saying? These are holy documents that are revered and holy, considered holy by people. And so for me, I'd much rather show respect for the document as like I would show respect for the Quran. And that's the approach I think is really important. And I think that you can find valuable things in all these different groups of scriptures. And I just say, take the good stuff out of it, man. Just use that and integrate that into your life. And but also, because you're being informed by these texts, it enables you to actually have better, thoughtful conversations with people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and their apologists.
You mean Mormonism? Sorry, I have to throw that in. I think that's one of the silliest things they've ever done, but that's just me. So
I always say Mormon Tabernacle Choir. That's like changing the name of Coca-Cola. Sorry.
It really is. Yeah. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Tabernacle Choir just sounds dumb. You're never going to change my opinion on that. So this is interesting, because maybe we can kind of shift gears just a little bit on this subject, because, again, based on how I was raised, and again, my mission, and in the apologetic phase, and this is somewhat argued strenuously in some areas within the church with some groups, and others are kind of, to me, the image is everyone's starting to scatter out a little bit more, and there's not as much unification of thought of the theme of the literal versus the. I don't think symbolic is the opposite of literal, but I'm not quite sure where the line is drawn. But the literal history, Levi literally saw that vision, and his interpretation is literal history, etc. Things like that. Whereas perhaps a more helpful approach, are you thinking in these angles? I should ask you instead of state. Does metaphor or analogy help you grasp, enjoy, appreciate the scriptures of the world, the Quran, the Book of Mormon, the Bible, etc., the Bhagavad Gita, etc.? Does it help that you're not taking it so literal, as opposed to I mean, there's some who say, yeah, it's all symbolic, and I think that's just as silly as saying it's all literal.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Seems to me like a mix would be a more useful way to approach the world scriptures. Is that what we're seeing it?
Yeah. And so if somebody wants to engage the Book of Mormon as an ancient document, I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, as a matter of fact, because I think that one could approach it as an ancient document. And whether it's historical or not is something for other conversations to have different dealings and everything like that. Because, this is the thing. Now, Dr. Richard Bushman, who's, by the way, just going to announce he's going to be coming back on my program. I'm going to be doing 2 episodes of Dr. Bushman. I'm going to be doing one about his newest book about the plates. And I'm going to do a second interview with him and Richard and Claudia Bushman to talk about their legacies. I figure they're both in their 90s. We need to get that interview taped. So that's
good argument.
So Richard Bushman just came out with his book on the plates. And there's something about the plates that has always entranced Dr. Bushman. He says there's power in those plates. There's something magical, if you will, about the plates. There's a tangibility about the plates that kind of breaks all the rules. And I kind of like that. See, I tell people I'm a Book of Mormon guy. Like, I'm not interested in the first vision. That, to me, Mormonism didn't start with the first vision. Mormonism started with the coming forth of the plates. Whether it's metaphor.
You're not alone in that one, that's for sure. You've got the entire early Mormon church.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because nobody even knew about the first vision until quite a ways later.
No.
So to me, I'm a Book of Mormon guy, and I like the Book of Mormon because it's familiar to me, because it looks and feels and sounds like the Bible that I grew up with. Okay, and I like the audacity of the story of this kid who encounters something. And I always tell people, I remember I was a little kid, and I think I mentioned this on Mormon Stories, and I was just a little kid. I was like probably 9 or 10 years old. And I remember thinking at the time, we need a Bible 2. We need a second Bible 2.0, if you will. Because it seems like the Bible we have today isn't working, because it seems like people are ignoring it, and they're not using it, and they've been all this kind of stuff. They've been attacking the Bible, because I was raised in a very literal conservative background. It's almost like we need another Bible. And then I hear about this other young boy who then encounters, maybe has the same question. Boy, we could use a second Bible. And I think that is that's why I have like this connection to young Joseph. People ask me, like, do you feel this connection to Joseph? I said, I feel a connection to the young Joseph, that boy who really felt like people aren't reading the Bible and they're abandoning Christianity, and we need another Bible. We need another witness. And I think that's kind of the impetus of this whole thing, in one sense. Again, assuming this is all just a naturalistic thing. But I do believe that it's birthed out of a sincere desire of this young boy to help lead souls to Christ. That's why, he was a Methodist exhorter. He was, then what is that exhorter? He's calling them to get up and let's do an altar call, because he's riffing on what the pastor's trying to get people to move their heart, change their hearts and stuff like that. So to me, there's that young boy that Joseph was. I was that young boy too. So I feel like, that's why the story of this young boy coming across these scriptures is just, it's just a great story, man. I love it.
Are you Joseph Smith reincarnated as an evangelical?
No, I am not. I do not believe in reincarnation.
What? Oh, how apostate can you get, man? Oh, you just.
Nor do I believe in multiple mortal probations, unfortunately.
Oh, now you're approaching the apostate doctrines, pal. You should pay attention. I'm just saying.
Do some deep doctrine, man. This is a great book, by the way. Obscure Mormon Doctrine.
Who's that by Chris Jensen? Is that brand new?
It came out a couple years ago. I have him come on. We do like a series now and then on it. It's
really kind of obscure Mormon doctrines, the moral probations and all that.
Yeah,
yeah.
And he's got it in alphabetical order. It's just it's really cool. It's a good book. I recommend it, folks. Obscure Mormon Doctrine.
I will have to get that book. Yeah. I personally think either the reincarnation or the multiple mortal probations makes vastly more sense than you've only got one shot. Otherwise, you're forever lost out of the celestial. That's simply ridiculous. That's my.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
who knows?
I mean, it's also preferable to a literal hell as well, right?
Yeah, right. Or an eternal hell.
Eternal.
And then the interesting thing, Steve, on the flip side of that is, if hell isn't eternal, maybe heaven isn't either. Right. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, boy, we could do some deep dives on that. That would make a fun conversation. So,
well, like I remember, it's just kind of funny. I just like to riff here. So I was watching the TV show American Dad, and they did this episode in which the apocalypse happens, and they're literally fighting during the tribulation, and there's this whole battle going on. And it was the first time I ever thought, and this was as an atheist, I was watching this episode, and it was kind of amusing because there was a rapture, and then the people who are left behind have to fend for themselves and fight these demons and all this crazy stuff. It's really a hilarious episode. And the thought came to mind. I thought, I wonder if there's a chance that the scriptures are telling us that God could lose. Because why is there a final battle if it's already been written out and we know who's going to win?
Myself, yeah.
And I thought, why is there even have to be a battle? And is something implied in the scriptures that's saying that God could lose, and that's why all these things could happen? And so to me, that's much more interesting. And again, I was thinking like this as an atheist, and of course I've kind of put that on the shelf. But I do. I like to engage in those thought experiments, because none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense if he's in control and we're just doing we've got this scripted thing that we're doing. Then the whole story becomes very boring and we lose all meaning and purpose in life if it becomes that we play an active role in this whole thing too. I'm fascinated by that concept too.
Yeah, fun stuff. So what other apostate, heathenish, unholy ghost spirited information, revelation types of information on the Book of Mormon do you have to project?
Okay, let me we went on a bit of a tangent there, which is fine.
I did. I apologize. Yeah. So we've determined the Book of Mormon can be seen as actual useful scripture, regardless of whether it's ancient or modern,
right,
regardless of whether it's literal or fiction, literal or fiction,
right. Because I'm willing to grant you that the Bible that happens in our own scriptures too.
So how far into Jesus's life would we be willing to take that approach? That becomes the historical Jesus issue in the New Testament, doesn't it? Right. Kind of interesting. So in a way, the Book of Mormon could be utilized by someone who had faith that this is yet again, like you said, a second witness.
The Book of Mormon is a two-edged thing here, dude. The Book of Mormon, if proven true, proves the Bible, right? But if the Book of Mormon is proven not to be true, it also can undermine the Bible too at the same time. Because if we can show that something could be made up, then we can also show that these ancient texts could also be just as made up as the Book of Mormon is too.
And we know, in fact, many of them were.
Right. So now that's a challenge to the Bible either way, so I just kind of look at it as I look, epistemological humility is what we have to take to approach to this, because if the evangelicals are going to go after the Book of Mormon and not then apply the same standards to their own Bible, they're being disingenuous and they lack humility. And I think it's really important, folks, for you evangelical scholars there that love to tear down the Book of Mormon, but you don't do the same with the Bible. I have some issues here with you, because one could argue, and again, let's go back because this is the role where faith comes into it. See, that's why I am not somebody who actually is really heavily into using the Bible to bolster my beliefs. I really do believe in the centrality of Jesus to the story is what's the most important to me. So you go back to the historical Jesus, what was made up, where stories made up about him. We also talk about like the gospel accounts where he seems to become more and more like God as, the theology of Jesus gets more and more complex as opposed to what we see in Mark and then what we see in John. It's like almost like two different characters, you could argue, right? That's the modern,
Sure.
Scholarship. And so I recognize that. And so I'm kind of like, okay, what do we do with Jesus? And I tell people, I said, it really does come down. The question that I can ask about the Book of Mormon is the same question that I can come up with the Bible and Jesus and the resurrection. Now, this is a great example. This is Josh Gailey wrote the book Witnessing Miracles, Historical Evidence for the Resurrection and the Book of Mormon. This is published by the Church Church of Jesus Christ. Folks, this is the actual Church of Jesus Christ, and that they are copyrighted. They have a registered trademark. And they are the Bickertonite Church. They're the third largest church in the Restoration. And Josh makes a very compelling argument that all the arguments that you can use in favor of Christ's resurrection, he said, I just took it one step further, and every argument that you could make in favor of the resurrection, you can make a stronger argument for the tangibility of the plates. And I would agree with that, because we do have witnesses that, we do have names of witnesses of people who claim to have handled and seen and hefted the plates, right?
We have the same thing for Jesus.
We have Paul saying, well, I got 500 people. Well, Paul, give me their names, right? Don't give me a number, give me their names. Because, see, this is the argument even the evangelicals will use, like, well, that witness statement was written out, and then they threw their names on there, and they didn't even sign it. I don't care. None of these witnesses went back on their witness statement.
Well, one of the issues with the witnesses that would appear to be somewhat problematic.
There are some problematic things, but still, the witnesses, the people who are putting their name down or who are witnesses, there's a much stronger argument in favor of the tangibility of the plates than the arguments that they're making in the Gospels. Because even Christians will say, well, they'll do all the whole thing with the witnesses. And then I'll be like, yeah, but if Paul instead said, I have 500 names, he literally would write out each one of the names and put it in the scriptures. Then that becomes the number one most compelling piece of evidence in favor of Jesus's resurrection, is that Paul gave us the names. And then you could go and verify at that time these things. This was written like 10 years after the resurrection of Jesus, some of these writings of Paul. But he doesn't do that. But we could go, we can still have conversations with the witnesses of the plates decades after the fact. So then it becomes a question.
We did, and they said that their statement was not accurately portrayed. They saw it was spiritualized, not physical.
And then you see Whitner saying, no, I saw it with my eyes. So, we go back and forth on this. What I'm trying to say is that we don't have that for the resurrection. We actually only have two accounts where we actually have two people who actually say, where Peter says, I saw Jesus, and then Paul says, I saw Jesus. We don't have anything else.
Thomas, doubting Thomas.
No, but we have what was written about Thomas. We don't actually have the statements of these people. We have Paul talking.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
And Peter's telling him, I saw him. Okay?
Right, I'm with you.
So we don't. So then the resurrection becomes this: either we have an empty tomb, and I know there's other options here, but let's just simplify it here. There's an empty tomb. Either the disciples stole the body, or Jesus rose from the grave. Okay. We also have plates. And under that frock, we either have plates of an ancient origin, or we have plates that were created in the 19th century. Richard Bushman believes there were plates, and Dan Vogel believes that there were plates.
Right.
Richard Bushman believes they're ancient. Dan Vogel believes they're modern.
Right.
But this is where the leap of faith is. The Christian says there was an empty tomb because Jesus rose from the grave. The Latter-day Saint says the Book of Mormon is historical because those were ancient plates. It's making the same claim. And either way, it's a faith. Yeah. It's a faith claim. And that's how we have to look at it. These are faith claims. And this is the best you can do. Because the second you try to make these apologetic arguments and get all this historical stuff, it's all going to fall apart. Either way, either side.
It did to me. Yeah. It's difficult for me still at this point to accept that God is only going to be satisfied with giving us something that we can only take on faith. If it's so damn important for us to believe, he could do a lot better. Because if I wanted you to believe something that I had created, I promise I'll give you the evidence.
So
I'm not to take it on faith. I'll show you I created something.
Okay.
And I agree. It's our modern culture, but it's quite difficult for me to swallow that pill still at this point. I'm just expressing my point of view.
I understand that. And this is how I tell people. I said, really, in one sense, I'm a Christian, but my belief is like a 51-49 proposition, 50 plus 1. Okay. So I easily can go the atheist route too. I respect atheists. I would spend more time probably on the atheist side debating different topics than I would on the Christian side, because I certainly would. Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
But I don't think I think there's a lot of weak arguments that us Christians use. I'm sorry, they are, and so that's why Christian apologists don't like me. I don't care, because but my whole point is that we really don't know, and there are legitimate questions as to whether there's a God or not. We have the problem of evil. That's a legitimate question, and I'm sorry, folks. I don't care what Alvin Plantinga says. I don't think we've answered that question yet. Okay, but the other thing is because we. Okay, let me put it this way. There's somebody in the chat room, okay? And he called me on the phone the other day, and I don't know if he wants me to give his name out. He probably wouldn't care, but I'm not. But I didn't get permission from him. If you want to chime in, this individual called me, and his girlfriend dragged him to go see the movie about the sex trafficking stuff, the Sound of Freedom movie.
Yeah.
And we're having this conversation because he's like, Steve, tell me why this is so big with evangelicals. And I kind of gave him like background on that, stuff like that. And he goes to me, says, one of the worst things I ever heard was in the movie, they said, the phrase they used at the end of the movie is God's children aren't for sale. I think that's what they said.
God's children is what?
God's children aren't for sale, right? About sex trafficking.
Okay, I see. Uh-huh.
And this individual goes to me and says, well, God doesn't seem to mind because he lets it happen.
Right on. And it is in the Old Testament. He hasn't cared for thousands and thousands and thousands of years what happens at all.
Right, because he was actually advocating for sex slavery of trafficking of children. Yahweh was doing that. This is in our own Bible, okay? Yeah. So when I have this individual go to me and tell me that, I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm not going to defend that. I'm not going to be that Christian apologist that's going to defend that God, if you will.
Right. Well, and my way of dealing with this, which I have not been able to deal with very much because it is an emotional issue with me, and I'm sure it is with the vast majority of people, is I am aware that we are finite, and I am aware that with a limited outlook, it will look contradictory. We cannot literally, physically, or spiritually, I'll put it this way, or psychologically, I'll throw in psychology, see the entire whole. So, in a way, you have to agree that what we know is not final or certain.
Absolutely.
And therefore, the way you can approach that is you can do the religious, well, I'll take it on faith. I get that. Or you can do the scientific, I will do the probability assessment. And if it's not probable enough, I'm fully justified in saying, no, I can't believe that.
Right.
Where I get ticked off at the church, I don't know if they do this as much anymore, but they sure did in my youth, is when they come back and make you feel guilty. Well, Satan is tempting you. The Holy Ghost is not very pleased with your decision. Therefore, his influence is lessened now, and you have a chance to sin. You know the goal.
Right. Yeah.
So that type of approach really turns me off. And so I'm willing to live with the contradiction and the problem at this point without having to solve it before I either love or hate God or my neighbors. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does. And this is the thing, like, look, I have so much respect for people where they're at on their journey. And I'm not going to tell people.
That's the Mr. Rogers approach.
Yeah,
and I say that with full compliment, not insult.
Mr. Rogers was one of the most Christian people that's ever walked the face of the earth.
Mr. Rogers had the psychology right on the button, man. He was awesome.
Yeah. And so to me, I know what it's like to be an atheist. I know what it's like to be angry at the church and want to burn the whole thing down. I know what it's like to have a simple faith. And I know what it's like to have a faith that's full of doubt. I know what it's like to be agnostic, where I don't know. I know what it's like to have a faith that makes you feel like you do know. I know all these kind of things because this is all part of the facet of the journey that I'm in. And the last thing I want to do is go fundamentalist on you either way, whether as an atheist or as a person who practices religion. Because I think fundamentalism is dangerous to humanity. And so my whole thing is...
I like that approach. I'll let you say that again. I will repeat it. Fundamentalism is dangerous to humanity.
Absolutely.
Not just whether it's a religious or political fundamentalism, but fundamentalism, the absolute desire to be so certain. And once you're certain, then you begin to condemn and kill others who think differently.
Absolutely. Dude, this is the thing. This is what scares the shit out of me with the secular leftist fundamentalism, is that it's just like a religion, except there's no chance for redemption. Once you've crossed that line, there's no going back in their minds. You've been canceled. That's it. And I don't like that, because that they're acting just like the Inquisition at this point. And I like the fact that with religion, at least it gives you a chance for more chances, more opportunities, if you mess up in life. But I do feel this sense of this fundamentalism that's really infected American Christianity, and this fundamentalism that's become a secular religion in our society. These two extremes are just tearing this country apart. And my whole thing is like fundamentalism in any way, shape, or form is dangerous, like I said, to humanity, period, full stop. And so for me, if you're an atheist and you're going to me and you're saying, Steve, why all atheists should be supporting what I'm doing, because almost all atheists go to me and say, one of the arguments they use against religion in general is that historically, almost all the wars are a result of religion, all the big wars, all this kind of stuff. And I say, I'll grant you that. I'll grant you that the war between the Protestants and Catholics did not really end until 1999, when the Good Friday Accords were signed in Northern Ireland. So we got experience fighting Catholics for a lot longer than we've even been fighting the Restorationists ourselves, right? And so I recognize that religion, it can be very damaging. It can also be really good. It can be beautiful. It can be uplifting. It can nourish you. It can give you meaning, a purpose in your life. It can make you part of a community of people that look out for each other. That the value of religion is so important that for us to turn our backs on it it would be devastating to our soul, to our collective souls of humanity, because I do believe that was because our ancient ancestors believed in something bigger than themselves is the reason why we are here today. And the second you lose faith in something bigger than oneself, then we are down a nihilistic path, and I think we see the destruction of humanity. So that's why it's important that I'm doing what I'm doing, is because, listen, I'm the evangelical, I'm from the enemy camp, going to the Restoration with an olive branch and say, let's talk. Let's try to emulate Christ. Let's follow the golden rule. Let's take all that's decent about our faith traditions and make that at the center of who we are. And rather than us tearing up each other and getting angry with each other all the time, which really bothers me because it just wounds my soul to see this happen, I want to talk to you. Why? Because I love you. Why? Because we're created in his image. Why? Because we are all image bearers. We are all children of God. That's what's most important to me. I don't care about all the apologetics. I don't care about winning an argument.
Yeah, but that's the fun stuff.
Well, that's fun. Hey, I used to have fun doing it too, my friend. But what I'm saying most importantly is I care more about my humanity.
That's a good word.
I'm a Christian humanist. A Christian humanist.
There you go. Yeah. That's good. Well, yeah, that'll work. Within that context, I can accept that. That's very interesting. So, Mosia, thank you. That's a good comment. You just struck a chord, my brother. T.O., my very dear friend, says, amen. Right on, T.O. I'll acknowledge you, my brother. And Mosia says, we're all humans, and I want to give Steve a big hug. See, this is what, group hug. So, really, what we've seen in the last I'm going to say the world, but really in America, it just appears to be magnified. Perhaps that's because that's where we're at. But this dividing between people for the absolute most god awful stupid reasons, simply because you smell different or you think something different about beach balls, and you need to like yellow beach balls or I'm going to box you, stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or you need to have a certain particular religious doctrine or I can't be your friend.
Right.
That, to me, what we're doing is we're demonstrating that we've lost this common humanity element. And that probably could do us a boatload of good if we would all turn around and emphasize, okay, we do think. I mean, Steve, I got news for you. You and I really do think differently in a lot of things. And we are almost best friends. We're good.
Yeah,
it is irrelevant to me whether I think like you or
Right.
whether you think like me.
Right.
We can together. And I mean, you're right. And I do apologize. I called you yesterday and said, hey, you want to come on my show?
Yeah. And
well, that was rude on my part, but this is an important element in our discourse,
right.
not just the religious element.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's probably it's unfortunate, they say don't talk about religion and politics at family reunions. Those two subjects end up being most divisive, but they don't necessarily need to be.
Right. They don't need to be. It's become that. I do feel like we are a point in their country that's really, we haven't been at this point since pre-Civil War. This is the worst our country's been. And we thought the 60s was bad, but this is even worse.
Yeah, this is worse. It's unfortunate, but it is.
Yeah, and it's just so bad. And I really do hope this is just a phase. Just this long national nightmare will just get over. We'll get over it. And we can move on. Because we all need to learn to forgive each other. Right. I mean, I literally have friends on both the left and right who will not be friends with somebody because of who they voted for.
Yeah. God, that's so freaking insane.
I know. Because
if I just please say it that way on my own channel. Come on, people.
I'm apolitical on my show. I do have views. Okay, I do have my views. But I just think like if you can't understand why Donald Trump won in 2016, it's because you were so disconnected from the guy in the VFW hall who's drinking beers and says, if I was running this country, that he struck a chord with certain types of people. And when I say this, I'm not defending Donald Trump. But what I will tell you this is that in 1992 and in 1996, the state that did the best for Bill Clinton in 92 and 96 was West Virginia. Guess what was the state that did the best for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020? It was Donald Trump. Both were able to strike the same chord with the same people. So for the tens of millions of people who voted for Bill Clinton in the 90s, those people are now all Trumpers. I come from Northwest Indiana, which is blue collar. Gary, Indiana, steel capital of the world. At one time was the murder capital of the world. Blue collar, highly unionized, and it's becoming Trump country up there now. And it was one of the most Democrat regions in the country historically. It hadn't elected a Republican to Congress since the Great Depression, almost elected a Republican this last time around. And people still, and this is all Democrats, blue collar Democrats that voted for Donald Trump. So what I hate is that for the progressives to hate on Trump supporters, and again, I understand, you got to understand that many of these people millions of people voted for Barack Obama twice, that also then voted for Donald Trump twice. Millions. Right. So we need to be a little bit more understanding as to why would these people vote for Donald Trump? Well, part of the reason they voted for Donald Trump is because of NAFTA. It completely devastated. Look, I'm from the Midwest. These were all manufacturing communities. There are factories everywhere. Mm-hmm. And they signed NAFTA, and it devastated the industrial Midwest big time. And remember when you could use, and what's so ironic is remember when you could buy a dishwasher, a washing machine, and it will last for 20 years? Yeah. It's because it was made in America by union people.
If they last 5, it'll be a miracle like Moses parting the Red Sea.
So now, people can spend $50 less now for a washing machine that's made in China, that's going to last you for maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
That's the price we paid. Then what is the secondary thing? Well, what happens now? Now you've devastated the Midwest. And again, I don't mean to get politics. I'm just describing. I'm being descriptive, not prescriptive, so people understand.
Right.
So now what do we have in the Midwest? Well, now we have what's called methamphetamine addiction happening. And we have the big pharma, all these high people are addicted to drugs. Why? Because they don't have any jobs and their lives suck. That's why. Okay. So for us to be so judgmental of somebody because of who they voted for, it's like, man, you haven't walked in those people's shoes, And so that's where I think
it's the same thing too, to bring this back around, because I don't want to get too much into politics.
Yeah, I don't want to do that either. But again,
no, I appreciate that example. That's a very excellent illustration. In religion, it is really, honestly, the same philosophical approach, wouldn't you say? Because just because your understanding of whatever scripture, Book of Mormon, Bhagavad Gita, Quran, Bible, it doesn't matter. Just because your understanding of a doctrine or a historical process that you think gave us that scripture is different than mine is no reason for me to dust my feet on your doorstep and excommunicate you and start talking negative about you. But we see that happening in religion, just like you're saying with politics.
Right. And this is the thing. Okay. So I know the Christian apologists who think, well, the reason why there's these cults, if you, or groups that are different than them, is that these people didn't know the Bible. And I tell people, so the reason why Mormonism succeeded when it did was because it was actually because people knew the Bible very well and were very well read in the Bible. It was part of the national conversation. Everybody was more Bible.
Yeah.
So the literacy of the Bible was much higher than it is today. An evangelical in the 1820s knew that Bible a hell of a lot more than even modern evangelical does today. It was precisely because of their knowledge of the Bible that the Book of Mormon was appealing to them. Everybody in that April 6, 1830 church service was a born-again, spirit-filled Christian. Them's my people. Okay, so the reality is it was a high degree of biblical literacy that led for people to believe in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon wouldn't work today because people don't know the Bible. But people knew the Bible then, and they recognized that there was something about the Book of Mormon that resonated with these people, and that's why it was successful, because of their high literacy of the Bible and Christianity in general. So to me, it's like, Christians, don't think these were dumb rubes that converted, because they weren't.
No.
Okay. These were very thoughtful people. These were people who really believed in God. These were people who Jesus was the center of their life. These were people who wanted to have a better faith. Yeah. They wanted all these, the very same things that's what they wanted. And that's what the appeal to the Book of Mormon. There was something about the Book of Mormon that resonated with those people. There's something about the Book of Mormon that resonates with me. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's the beauty of the document, is that it's birthed out of my people. It comes out of the evangelical world. It comes out of American evangelicalism. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they are our cousins. And for too long, for 200 years, we've been fighting each other. And I think that what we need to do is, rather than fight with each other, this next period of time, now we're at the 200th anniversary of the coming plates, is later this month. I want us to dedicate ourselves to having thoughtful conversations with each other, and then take the lead, follow the example at the very dead center of the Book of Mormon, which is arguably a war document, but at the very center of it is the anti-Nephi-Lehi story, where it talks about burying their weapons. And I think that's what we need to do. Both sides.
Say that again.
Where they bury their weapons in the anti-Nephi-Lehi. Okay.
That's in the center of the Book of Mormon.
It's in the very center of the Book of Mormon.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was discovered by my friend Dr. Christopher Thomas of a Pentecostal reads the Book of Mormon. It's at the very center. And so that
point is when they laid down their weapons of war and quit fighting. Gosh, I wonder if there's a lesson there for some of the. But you know what, though? I mean, all right, I love to pick on the apologists because
you were one.
I were one. I still am now, somewhat, but from a different point of view. But on the other hand, I don't like being identified as an apologist anymore. I want to be more of a conversationalist like you are. However, the church does appear to be attempting to change in just that direction you're pointing out in many respects. The theme of we have to be a peculiar people in order to fulfill a biblical standard. I don't see that bandied around like I did when I was a teenager at all. And in fact, quite frankly, some of the changes in the approach with the temple endowment stuff, some of it's being taken away, some of it's being modified at all, etc., so that it can be more congenial with a Christian interpretation. The accusation is Mormons are trying to now appear to be more Christian. Now, whether they're becoming that or not is a different argument. But there's no question the change in outwardness is definitely getting better. And you and I talked about this, Russell M. Nelson's conference talk, where he said, hey, knock off all the sarcasm means, and I have a hard enough time myself. Technically I haven't accomplished much in that regard, because when I see bullshit, I still call it out. But I've got it at least in my head now that I can, you're good for me this way, because I'm enjoying this conversation with you far more than I enjoyed if I had an apologist who was trying to show me what an idiot I was for not accepting the ancient historicity of the Book of Mormon. So the church is trying, is what I'm trying to say, it appears, and it's also getting criticized for doing that as well. Kind of interesting. You can't please everyone. We know that. We know that, of course.
Right.
So,
well, I think I don't know if you ever saw the conversation between Jacob Hansen and Jim Bennett when I had them on my program. It was one of the most explosive episodes that probably has ever been on a Mormon podcast, period. And that then demonstrated the conflicting worldviews between two Latter-day Saint apologists, one being more progressive, and Jim Bennett did, like his stuff with the CES letter, and then you have Jacob Hansen. And it was an explosive episode. And it just goes to show that there are fissures in the church that were exposed in that conversation, because people said, I've never seen anything like this happen before, like this kind of conversation. It was raw and it was real. But so we do have, over the course of the next 20 years, there's going to be a lot of shifting going on in the church. I find it very fascinating, the Google search thing, where now when you do Google for church locations, instead of an angel Moroni, now it's a cross. And I do think that if they're already using the cross to be put on maps, how long before we start seeing crosses on their buildings? I think that's the logical next thing. They start embracing the cross. They start embracing more Christian symbology. I know that I've been hearing that missionaries are now wearing crosses.
Yeah, I have too. It's interesting that the Christians aren't adapting angel Moronis, though.
Well,
seems like a one-way street.
Well, I would agree.
I'm not complaining. I'm just observing.
Yeah, and again, the evangelicals have a long road to hoe on this whole thing too, because we're so we have dug the trenches so deep, man. And I think people have gone so deep into this whole, a lot of this conspiracy stuff on the right that's going on, that's infected our people. It saddens me. So I almost want to just try to model Christian behavior, Christ-like behavior, by just showing, well, why don't we just follow and practice what Jesus did? Like I don't go to church regularly. I go visit different churches, but one of the things that really grieves me more than anything is as soon as the church service is over, people start talking to each other, and 90% of them are just gossiping. And the Bible condemns gossiping. It's very hurtful. I was very, very hurt by the church, and it's been really hard for me to find a church home. But I'm a seeker.
Well, do you have to find a church home? Because I've never found a church home, but I don't think that's affecting my spirituality.
No, I agree. And
I've got a few people saying it is because I'm swearing more, but that's irrelevant.
Well, they say that actually when you swear, it releases endorphins and can be helpful to people. It actually has a psychological. So there's a reason why people do that. I try to refrain from using harsh language.
I do too.
But yeah, I just want to be kind and honest and being transparent with people. I think that's really important. And I just want to just be that guy that people can go to and talk. Look, I spend a lot of time off camera counseling people whose shelves have broke, people who are having faith crises, people who are LGBTQ. It's become a ministry in that sense, in that I'm there to help people and just be there where they're at and not say, hey, I got the solution for you. No, I'll be like, no, I just want to listen to what you have to say because I understand, because I know what it's like to go through and suffer PTSD. And I've experienced it. So let's just talk through this together. And so that's kind of what this has become, as a ministry in that sense, is for people who've been hurt by the church, whether it doesn't matter what church it is, doesn't matter, because there's plenty of hurt people on our side too.
Oh boy.
And so I want to be a place that people can, a safe space for people say, no, I don't feel the need that I have to join a church. I've never joined a church my entire life. Right. But in one sense, I've built my own community, and people need community. And for some churches, community. For me, my community is, whenever I go to Utah, I have a place to stay. People take care of me. People give me money. People are very generous. And these are polygamists. These are Latter-day Saints. These are evangelicals. I have friends and people who will give. I've stayed at people.
Community.
What's that?
Can I be a part of your community?
You are part of the MBR community. You're part of the canon. Yeah. No.
I should hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is about as wonderful as it can get, as far as I can tell. Now, right. The shtick is to find a way to, without imposing organized religion or organized politics back onto us, how to continue spreading this. The simplest way to put this, it's crazy because it comes from religion, but I accept it. This brotherly love and sisterly love theme of accepting who you are instead of the ridiculous attempt of trying to make you into my own image of beliefs.
Right.
And so many people have so much trouble with that. I'm just saying, it's a fascinating thing. It's a psychological mar on their soul. That
I know what it's like to be an angry atheist who wants to destroy those people's faith. I want to burn the whole thing down, and I just want to, I was that aggressive anti-theist atheist, right? And I was there and maybe I needed to be in that space for a while, even. There's a therapeutic value to atheism. That's why I don't say that, I'm not. I went to Aaron Ra and Aaron Ra once, and I said I'm a pro-atheist evangelical, and his eyes got really big. So I understand the utility of it as well. So again, I'm not a hater. I'd like to talk to people. I don't have an agenda. I want to say, like I said, this conversation deviated, which I fully expected it would. I'm glad that it did. I'm glad to have these stream of consciousness conversations. I also want to say that, I whenever I put Mormonism or the Book of Mormon on the microscope, I just want to remind you all that I do the exact same thing from my side. And I think that really more apologists on both sides need to do the exact same thing.
Yeah. Very well put. Very cool. Well, I hope our audience has appreciated this conversation. I always appreciate having you on. I need to have you on more often. I apologize for not doing that.
No, it's not a problem. It's been busy. It's been a busy summer, and and of course we talked about maybe doing some stuff with Jonathan Neville again down the road too.
Absolutely, and he's been contacting me, and I haven't kept in good contact with him. If you hear from him, just tell him, hey, I love him. I'm still thinking about him, but
good.
I haven't forgot anything. But
good.
It's
and
just
so we'll do
been a weird summer, hasn't it?
It's funny because technically I have not interviewed you yet. You haven't really been on my show. So
on me.
So we need to do the Kerry Shirts Backyard Professor, his story.
Oh, nobody will watch that. That's boring.
I tell people I only do my channel for an audience of one, just for me. Anybody else can join along. So all I care. So you got me. I'll watch it. Okay. I promise it will get at least one view.
All right. Fine.
But I want to have you on, and I want to ask you your life story. I want to kind of talk about my engagement with you, because I remember as an atheist engaging you as the Mormon apologist, not literally engaging you, but mentally like, man, I'd kick his ass, that kind of thing. That was my attitude at the time. But then to read later on, I remember going through the ex-Mormon Reddit and somebody posted an image of something you wrote in a book review on Amazon and say, hey, I think this is the Backyard Professor, and I think he's left. I'm like, so I've been following you for a very, very long time. And then
to see you then resurrect and resurface coming
Well,
out Sunday night.
and so I'm a
Discussions Incorporated platform. And I know that RFM and Bill Reel played a big role in recruiting you to get you back so that people can hear your voice.
Yep.
But I also like that you're not you're a complex man. You're somebody that's not super black and white. Maybe you were there for a while and you went through your angry atheist phase, right? But now you've kind of moved on from that. And I think you just have a really fascinating story to tell. So I want to have you on. We're going to do the Backyard Professor epic interview where no holds barred. It's going to be raw. It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I will hopefully be able to share what information that you would like me to share, that I can do it in a good way. What's that?
That's my Cylon.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm surprised nobody in the comments brought this up. This is Mormonism in Space. This is by Glenn Larson, Battlestar Galactica. I love, folks, eventually I do plan on doing an episode, Mormonism and Battlestar Galactica. I'm looking forward to that.
And Mormonism is Star Trek. We've got someone who does Trekkie themes.
Oh, yeah. Rebecca. That's right.
All right. Do you have any last words you'd like to say before we close out tonight, Steve? It's been so much fun having you back.
Kerry, you are one of the most wonderful human beings that I've ever met. I got to have so much fun with you when you came to the Elder Pingree movie screening, which was this February, but it seems like it was like 5 years ago now because so much has happened.
Does, doesn't it? Well, now we can say we go way back.
We go way back. Yeah. So either way, you're a cool dude. I like spending time with you. I like these conversations. And also it's almost 8:30 here. So I'm about tapped out, man.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Well, I could go on for another 6 hours, but I'm the motor mouth. You've got the scholarship. I'm the motor mouth. But thank you again so much for showing up. And for the rest of you awesome audience people, we're going to close out for now. However, we will be back next week and the week after that and the week after that for another 299.68354 years to share as many goodies as we can with you. In the meantime, remember, stay happy, be good, do well, make lots of friends. Don't stay up late unless, of course, you plan to party and have a boatload of fun. Read a good book periodically, cool it on the TV, be friends, love one another, and we will see you again on the Backyard Professor.
Yeah.